Japan, affectionately known as the land of the rising sun. Ironic how its car culture thrives after sundown. A culture made up of Touge, where lightweight sports cars dominate the downhill, the Midnight Club, where high-powered cars race down the Wangan, and a drift culture that took over the streets of Tokyo. These cultures have become defined by the cars we associate with them, but what is it that makes these not just great cars, but great Japanese cars? Is it the tunability of their engines, the driver-centered interiors, or the beautiful simplicity in their design? Well, to find out, join me in designing my own Japanese sports car in none other than automation. Starting off the build with aluminum panels, a steel monocoque. I also want to use a transverse engine to match what the NSX had. And as per usual, we're going double wishbones, front and rear. Now starting off the design, I was thinking of trying to make pop-up headlights fit in this space here. But to make that happen, I need to use these seam fixtures and really just hope that they'll end up looking good. And after sliding in another piece, the general shape is coming together. I feel like it's a lot easier to see my vision for these things. With the final corners in place, these are going to be our car's headlights. Moving on to the grille, I really like the look of this fixture, but I want to fill in the sides here with a pair of fog lights, for when the pop-ups are down, of course. Next up is to throw on a badge, which I was experimenting with a new badge for the channel. This one centered around the Tuscan Pegasus. So if you have any ideas for color schemes or design, join my Discord linked in the description below and let me know. Now for the color scheme, this car needs a more saturated red. Just ignore the fact that it's a BMW color. And in the same vein, I think a pair of white wheels would match perfectly. So of course I had to go with these Honda style 6 spokes. Really just ties it all together. After throwing on some mirrors, it's time to move back and focus on some side vents, of course, to feed air to our mid-mounted engine. And I found a fixture that fits this gap perfectly, but we need to go back and fix those seams for our door. Now we have a pretty normal looking door seam, just ignore the fact that it's a straight line. What seems to be a trend for the builds on this channel are to use a pair of vents down behind the rear wheels, which in this case will help with airflow, but it also just helps to make the rear a lot more rounded and organic, just like a lot of Japanese design. To continue that thought, I also want to use a molded plate holder that's just going to add depth and curves into the lower fascia, and as an added bonus, it'll tie those vents into the rear design quite well. And after throwing in a plate, I think it's time to move up the rear to the taillights. Which initially, I wanted to use these lights, but I felt they were just a little bit too angular for this build. So I found another fixture that has a similar silhouette, just a lot more rounded. After orienting them the correct way and resizing them to fit the car, I just think they came out looking a lot better. And to emphasize the roundness back here, I also went with the FD RX-7's rear wing, which just helps to fill in the really long trunk line that this car has, and adds a sporty feeling to a rather tame rear design. I did also later stretch the wing out a bit. And I think one of the last touches here will just be a pair of exhaust tips, which not only helps finish the rear, but also the rest of the exterior. Back to the engineering, this car will be rear-wheel drive. Now for the engine, I thought there was nothing more JDM than having an inline 6, but inline 6 didn't end up fitting in this car, so we'd have to go with a 3.2 liter V6. But to be fair, when I think of a V6, I think R35 GTR, NSX, 350Z, all Japanese sports cars, so I think it's a good compromise. And this one will be naturally aspirated, so pretty high compression, high cam profile, and spring stiffness. I also wanted to throw in a decently high redline of 7,800 RPM, which I think should fit this build pretty well. It's also gotta have variable valve timing. As I mentioned, it's naturally aspirated. And because the engine will be visible from the cockpit, I feel like I need to throw on a Honda VTEC valve cover, which kind of looks cursed on a V6. And after all is said and done, I decided to be true to the gentleman's agreement and top out with a horsepower rating of 276. Although some manufacturers lied about horsepower, this car really just doesn't need more. I feel like it should have a 5-speed manual, and I actually made the top speed more like 170, so forget about that 192 that you see right there. Now, the wheels might be a little bit big for this car and horsepower rating, but I just think they look great with this fitment. Now, as for brakes, I went with decently large single caliper discs, which should be plenty to stop this thing. For sports car suspension, I tend to remove the camber that automation thinks that I need. I also occasionally add a bit of toe to the front wheels, and then just finish off by stiffening the springs and dampeners with a slight emphasis on the front. After that, the game thinks our car should handle pretty well, and the graphs look good. I also lowered the suspension just for better fitment. We're going to be starting off the interior with the FD RX-7's dashboard, because I figured this car needs to have that fighter jet cockpit kind of feel, and this dashboard does that pretty well. Next up is going to be a pretty standard center console. And I also really wanted to use like 90s Recaro seats, and we'll touch them up in a second. The plan for these seats was to cover them in red cloth, just like you'd see in like a Type R Civic. I feel like there are a few parts that are just undeniably JDM, and to me, these kind of red seats are absolutely one of them. And as we're wrapping up the upholstery, I think these things look amazing. Even through the windows looking in, I love it. I'm also going to throw in some molded door cards here to fit with the dash. It also just helps to make the interior a little bit more snug. If that's a good thing, I'm not really sure. As we're doing upholstery work, I put some red cloth on the door card, but you'll have to wait until beamed in order to see that. And this is of course a driver's car, so it needs to have a central tack, which as you'd expect, the FD RX-7 also has. I also threw on a few auxiliary gauges. Unfortunately, I don't have any circular ones, so it's going to look just a little bit jank. And I think a period correct wheel does a lot for the POV in this car. And this time, I'm not going to forget about some of the small details. In this case, the radio and AC. And I think the interior is really starting to come together. Speaking of little details, I also want to put some lights on the dash. You know, just because I can. And as I fix the mirror here, this is essentially how it's all looking. There are a few tweaks and fixes that you'll see in Beam, but I hope you like it, and it looks at least vaguely JDM. Alright guys, before we get into the driving test, there's a few changes to this car that you might want to see. For one, those red door cards that we couldn't get to work in automation look absolutely great in this interior. It really ties together the whole thing. Secondly, you got a white dial in the gauge cluster. I think it looks very JDM, very much something you'd see in a Honda. I think it looks great. And I also spent a lot of time on the animations, making it so that our attack actually redlines at 7800. You can see as we redline it, the engine's going to be heating up. You know, all the animations work as they should. Coming down to the pedals, clutch, brake, gas, they all work. The one little issue is our gear shifter. It just kind of wobbles, but you know, the movement is nice to see. The parking brake does also go through the armrest, but again, it's nice to see that it works. You know, this car will be available to download in a link in the description below if you guys want to check that out. And so I wanted to make sure everything worked on this car, even the pop-ups. Ignore the fact that they are absolutely tiny. I had to kind of fit them into the silhouette that we made earlier, and you know, they're just little guys. It's kind of cute looking, especially from the bonnet or the hood view. Just little tiny pop-ups. You gotta love it. And of course, they do work as they should. And if you do download this car and you want to mess with those, the pop-ups are binded to the fog lights. But for now, let's go ahead and get this car on the Touge. See how well it drives. You know, it's crazy to see just how small this car is in comparison to an AE86. Of course, this is not an official mod, it's just a little challenge car I made a while back. But it really shows that our car is meant to be a small, lightweight Japanese sports car. You know, something in a size comparison to like an MR2. Without further ado, let's go ahead and see how this thing compares to Takami's 86. Alright, we're going to let him get off to an early lead here. Use Ryosuke's strategy, figure out how he drives, learn how to overtake him from there. Overall, we're going about half throttle to keep up with him. So this car is pretty quick. Looks like he's taking an alternate route here. He's a little banged up, he's still driving. Obviously, if we gun it full throttle, we are quite a bit quicker. He is damaged, but we'll ignore that. Alright, I guess we're just on our own lap here. Some of our first impressions are that this car is pretty quick on the throttle. Again, it's really light, it's got pretty wide tires for what it is. Don't quite remember what we threw on here. It might have been like 245s in the rear, something crazy. Not something you would really see in a Japanese sports car, I don't think. Oh, sheesh. I forgot Mount Akino. But hey, good news, our lights work. See the two blinkers there and the hazards. Alright, hold up. See if we can catch up to him. We bang up the rear of the car. Here we go. Come on. Turning circles, pretty good. This is just a small road. Try and get a little drift going. Actually handles pretty well. Of course, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive. Snap oversteer is pretty hard to overcome with this car, but it's intuitive. Okay. He should be done. We probably shouldn't see him again. It does make pretty good power down low. Jesus. I found him. Let's try that again. Yeah, honestly, if you just mash the throttle, it will lose control of the rear. Very fun, very lively car. Trail braking is pretty easy to do. Pretty good in a corner, handles really well. Continuing on the train of thought with those tires, they are on a medium compound, so if you go into a corner too fast, they will scrub. If you get on the throttle too hard, you know, you'll lose the rear. Exactly what you'd expect from... Yeah, not impossible to catch. Maybe pull the handbrake there. Of course, all that weight in the rear, it is still pretty hard to catch. Oh, and I was just thinking about, in terms of power, of course, we stuck very true to that gentleman's agreement of 276 horsepower. Did not go anywhere above that. Unlike what, you know, a lot of Japanese, you know, sports car manufacturers did. You know, the NSX, the GTR, the Supra, they all made a little bit more power, and they just kind of said they made 276. But this car, it does not need any more than that. It is very small, much lighter than any of those cars previously named. I don't have the weight on me currently, but I will probably flash them up on the screen for you guys. But really, I think the philosophy of this car is just to be a little canyon carver, mountain car, something you just kind of take around the track and have fun with. It's very forgiving. Even as you can see right now, I'm still pretty unfamiliar with the car, and I really forgot the layout of this road, and I haven't crashed. Well, I crashed earlier. Since I've been trying to drive tamely, I have not crashed. Of course, if you go full throttle on anything, you can end up in a guardrail pretty easy. Really, I'm just very happy with how this car drives. But, you know, knowing it's a Japanese sports car, I got something in mind for this. You know, for what I wanted this car to be, it is absolutely the finished product. But knowing, you know, the people that drive these cars, the tuner community, I've got something in store for you guys. Now for our tuner variant, we're going to be fitting carbon fiber bumpers. I also think a wrap would be very fitting, and I just love this purple color. It also looks amazing with the red seats. A pair of gold BBS wheels would be a classy pick for this build. I can also really see someone stretching out the tires and adding a little bit of camber to the fitment. And I think the biggest thing for this engine is obviously going to be the turbo. Initially, I wanted to run a twin-turbo V6, but there's just something about a giant single turbo that fits the tuner vibe a lot better. And with 20 PSI, this beast should be enough. The next step, naturally, is to straight pipe it. You know, how else are we going to piss off the neighbors? And after forged internals and a turbo, we're making 800 horsepower. We're also going to powder coat the valve cover to match the wrap. And this build would not be complete without a body kit, so we're going to fit some over fenders onto the car. And I think it's already starting to look like a high schooler got his hands on it. I can also see someone throwing on some aftermarket taillights. Now, they don't exactly fit the silhouette of the previous ones, but you all get the idea. And don't forget the absolutely ginormous wing on the back, which this car actually might need for all that power we added. Now to showcase the interior, we got all the touch points wrapped in purple, the checkered floor mats, everything is wrapped Alcantara, the eBay steering wheel, boost gauge on the A-pillar, and the NOS bottle resting on the passenger seat. Pairing that with the carbon bumpers, the wrap, the wheels and camber, and the wing, it is all very much an over-the-top tuner build. So let's get this on the road and see if we can actually drive it. Alright, and I figured the only place to test a car like this is the Shikoku Expressway. And so we're here in Tokyo, and you might be wondering why the graphics look so bad. Because I wanted to have traffic on this map, and in order to get that to run with at least a decent frame rate, I did have to tank the graphics. But hey, you know, in the interior it still looks pretty good. Our checkered floor pattern did not exactly export pretty well, but I wasn't really sure if it was supposed to look like that in automation anyway. But at least the rest of the build is looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and get this thing on the road and see what kind of speed we can get. Because the initial export of this build, I kept the tire compound that the original car had, which was, you know, the automation medium compound. And frankly, with the amount of power this thing makes, as soon as the turbo spools up, it just turns into a drift build. It will lose the rear immediately. And so I fitted some better tires. You know, I figured someone with the money to make this build happen can afford some nice tires. So it drives better now, for sure. It's still possible to get the rear to kick out, but definitely not as easy. And immediately, we're about to hit 200. Yeah, already miles past what the original top speed of this car was. See if it handles speed pretty well. It seems to be doing it. I do believe the speedometer in the car is like 20-30 miles an hour over what it actually is. So, you know, it's pretty hard to see, so it's pretty easy to avoid that. I will say it sounds pretty good. You don't really get much turbo noise in here, but a V6 just sounds so great sometimes. And also with the high top speed, and it still being a 5-speed manual, it is kind of hard to adjust to the gear ratios. And so just the fact that I'm pretty inexperienced driving stick, it's a little hard to get used to. Figure a near 1,000 horsepower build, it's not going to be easy to drive anyway. So, no issues with that for me. Yeah, and in terms of design, the finish on this thing looks absolutely insane in Beam. It's got that kind of matte satin finish, which I really didn't think would show up that well, but I do think it looks good. The gold wheels shine really well. Oh, I lost it. Oh, I tried to floor it in the tunnel to hear it. And so I raised the red line to 9K, and yeah, if you match the throttle on this thing, you will lose it. But I think now it's time to get our original build onto the track and figure out what kind of time it can put up. Compare that to some of our previous builds in this series. So I will see you on the track. Or maybe a little heavy on the throttle, but still pretty good launch for the start of our lap. For the first chicane here, we're going to be going into second gear. We're sitting pretty high in the rev, so just back into third. For this next corner here, we just want to ease into the throttle on third gear until the corner starts to straighten away. We start adding a little bit more gas until we're full throttle. Into fourth here. This next little bend, just a little tap of the brakes. Help the car corner a little bit better. Start braking as soon as we hit that curve. Making sure to be easy on the throttle coming out of this corner. It's very easy to get the rear end loose on this thing. I think I'm going to try and hold third gear here. Hoping the camber helps us out a little bit. Car seems to handle it pretty well. And onto the main straight. Speedometer is a little bit off. I think we're probably going about 40 miles an hour faster than we are. Up into fifth. That's our final gear here. See if the arrow's enough to hold on full throttle here. Pulling us right out to the edge. Not really sure where to brake here. Maybe the 200 board. Hard on the brakes. Almost drifted it. Try and stick a little bit closer to the apex here. Braking once again in the same spot. And try to brake a little bit better to the apex here. Getting the throttle a little bit heavier. They're already looking a lot better for this lap. I think I liked third for the camber here, so we're going to stick with that. Make sure not to come in as fast as we did. Nice and easy on the throttle out of the corner. I got to remember our red line is 7,800, not 8,000. So brake just before we hit that red line there. Yeah, I'm going to go off the throttle a little bit here, just try and get it to rotate. One of the perks of mid-engine rear-wheel drive car is it does like to rotate. Okay, brake just before the 200 board. Locking up the wheels a little bit. And honestly, that was perfect. Just don't lose it out of the apex there. It's getting hard on the throttle. Not really sure where I want to brake here, but maybe just before the 100. Keep the car around. Lost it again. Looks like we want to brake about at the 100 again. Much better. Didn't miss second this time. Yeah, and the rest of this lap is going to be pretty new to me. Try and brake a little bit late here, maybe right at that board. I remember this being a pretty late apex. Slowed down a little bit too much, but not a problem. Still pretty decent line. I think I might want to go into second here. It's pretty steep. Carry too much speed, it'll really send you out to the edge there. And up into third and back into second for the final corner. Almost missed the apex there. And hard on the throttle for the finish. Here we go, into fourth. Okay, 2:21.6. That's a pretty good time for this car. You know, pretty slow for what BeamNG thinks we should be doing on this track. But again, this is just meant to be a lightweight Japanese sports car. This is not, you know, some crazy European supercar. It's just meant to, you know, get you in the driver's seat and have fun, have a lively, you know, quick on the throttle, well-handling car. And I think that's exactly what it meant to be. That's exactly how I felt driving it. If you got on the throttle a little bit too hard, you're a little bit, you know, not careful with it, it will, you know, bite you, it'll spin. But overall, it's a really fun car, and from what I've heard about Japanese sports cars, they are fun cars, seriously. I forgot I did my old testing on Hirochi Raceway, so no comparison, but the car just felt great to drive. At the end of the day, that's the whole point of these builds, is to end up with a great, engaging car. And hey, if you've made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, and hype the video, and I'll see you in the next one.